Hey everyone, it's Amberly. Today I'm going to be demonstrating one of my paintings. It's for my best friend in the entire world, and tomorrow is his birthday. So I'm going to try to finish this bad boy today. It's already 2, but that does not deter me. So what I did was I used this model from the internet. It's just a really cool owl. It's actually orange. It doesn't look that orange in the picture. It kind of looks more red. But I went ahead and sketched it last night. Of course, sketching isn't always exact. You can see a couple of my boo-boos where I erased. As right there. So, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to paint what yet. I know I want the owl to be tan. I'm not sure if I want these white details to be blue, or if I want to keep them white and make the background blue. My friend JT is very, very partial to brown and blue, so I have yellow, gold, brown, white, blue, cerulean blue, and then dark blue. And then I also have a dark brown, a light brown, and a burnt umber in the little tubes. I'm contemplating making my owl tan and blue, and then maybe making the background like a midnight sky, maybe putting a little Big Dipper with Orion's belt over here. I'm gonna get started, and we're gonna see how this this turns out. First, I'm going to make the tan, since it's going to be the basis for my painting. Let's see. I'm definitely going to be using some melted chocolate, and since the majority of my painting is going to be brown and tan, I'm just going to add a whole bunch of that. Now this is more of a, I'm not really even sure, it doesn't have a color listed, but you can see it is a much lighter brown. And we're going to get some of this deep brown. Oh, didn't even open this one yet. And that's not a very, it's not a very dark brown. It's not as brown as the melted chocolate. Then we're going to add a little gold. This is called King's Gold, or Royal Gold, Oro Real, if you speak Spanish. And we're just going to get some of that up in there. Got my towel. And then we're just going to add a little white. Ugh. Dried paint. Yum. Just a dab of white for now. Just a little tiny bit. So there are all of our colors, and they're dripping. I am going to grab a paintbrush. It's one of those super cheap paintbrushes that like the kids use in kindergarten, so I don't mind messing it up. And I'm just going to use the end of it to blend all of my colors. I do want this to be one solid color. I'm not leaving any areas that are a different color, it's all going to be a sort of homogeneous. Let's see how close I am. Got a nice brown going on in there. A little bit of that gold where it got on my finger, still hanging out. But that is okay. I'm now going to move my palette up onto the table because I'm going to be using this area to paint. Now, I'm one of those painters that like to get very up close and personal. So I'm going to zoom that out a little bit. And I'm going to be painting up here. I'm going to double check. Well, see if I can't move that over for you guys a little bit. Again, I apologize if at any time I am out of frame, because it's hard to be able to move your painting and brush around and try to still keep it in focus. I obviously do not have a tripod. I very much wish I did have a tripod. And right now I'm just looking for a pretty good sized brush. Of course, this is one of my absolute favorites. It's stained a little purplish gray because I do like using it so much. Here's another one of my favorites. It's stained purple and blue, so it looks totally badass. But none of those colors will run. Now, you can see this one has a slanted angle, and this one's more straight. I want a slanted angle for a lot of this. I'm also going to want an even smaller slanted angle, if I can find one. Even a flat top will be fine for my purposes. Again, two more of my favorites. So we sort of have like a large, medium, and a small going on. I will probably not be using this one as much. So I'm working with two paintbrushes. That is all I need for right now. And now I'm going to get comfy, move my towel, put my palette over here so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. Snuggle up close to you guys. Drop my paintbrush. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I have like a really nasty shirt I use for painting and hair dyeing. Although these are nice PJ pans, I just bought these. I'm going to try to be careful to not get that covered. I will be investing in a painter's smock soon. So I only got a little bit, just enough to kind of start out. Now these outlines are easy to cover with darker paint. Not so easy to cover with lighter paint. So I will most likely be erasing a lot of these lines when I get to when I need to paint them. And that nice angular brush is really good, especially if you need to get into any little crevices. You can use just the tip and get up in there. Now it's going to look very splotchy at first. It will most definitely end up needing a second coat, or at the very least a touch-up. That is how you get very solid colors, if that is what you are going for. In this case, I am going for very solid colors. But at the same time, I also have to be very careful because if I do decide to leave that white, the brown is definitely going to end up showing through. Unless I get several coats of paint. The main idea of painting on canvas is to leave no white marks, none of these little bubbles, none of those, if you can see that. Even when you are painting with white, you do not want to leave any of the bubbles. I did want to paint this owl in teal and white with a black background, but I kind of brought up to JT, you know, asked him, how much do you like teal? And he was like, yeah, it's alright. You know me though, I like blue and tan, blue and brown, which unfortunately are two of my least favorite colors. I think brown looks crappy, considering it is the color of crap. And I went to a private Catholic school for 8 years, and we wore blue and white every day. So as we can see here, I made quite the boo-boo. I may be able to fix that. My philosophy is, even if it doesn't come out the way you wanted it to, you cannot mess up art. Anything you make is considered art. So even if it's not to your standards, necessarily. What the hell? So something just fell over on the other side of the room. Not really sure what that was. So, now we're about all done with the majority of the body. And now we need to take care of the pupils and these little details. This brush, obviously, is going to be far too big, so I need to find a smaller brush. We have 3 brushes. One is a large, we have a medium, and then a very, very short and small. I like to pick out several brushes for my purposes, just in case I get into a tight area. So we're going to, I think I'm going to grab the large for now. And we are going to continue on with our body. I apologize for putting my arm directly in the view of the camera, but I am working with some loaded space. Now these shapes are just kind of seed-like, and there are 14 of these around each eye. The angles always want to be coming directly from the center of the eye, so I did the best I could with that. You want to avoid getting too much paint around these areas because it will cause a buildup that will look really obvious and not terrible, but not as good as what it could be when you are finished. I really liked this design because I like owls. I think they're cool. And the sketch was very minimalistic. It was very easy, which means the paint job is usually going to be easy, especially since we're only working with about three to four colors, most likely. And therefore there's not a lot of detail work because everything is a very solid color. So I would recommend, if you are just maybe getting into painting, I'm not exactly a professional, definitely not a professional, but I have painted a lot of things and added a lot of detail work to a lot of my pieces. But if you are just starting out, something with solid colors, heavy outlines, might be your best option. As I said, I'm not a professional. Professionals can paint with white, and I mainly cannot because I always end up coloring outside the lines or inside the lines that are supposed to be white. As you can see, we basically have the entire body done. Just need to paint the pupils, and the rest of it, including the legs, will be a different color. This tree branch will also be brown, and the leaves will be brown and possibly blue. I do think I'm going to do blue. I don't want to leave it white. It looks too realistic, and I'm not a realistic person a lot of the time. So now I do believe I'm going to take this it's the medium brush, but it's very fine, and hopefully get that pointy enough that I can gather up the paint and get it in the pupil without making too much of a mess. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my thicker flat brush, and then if I have to go with a smaller brush or the angled brush, I can do that. So now we're going to start working on this tree branch that you can hardly see. But as I fill it in, you should be able to see it a lot better. I am going to go back to my medium brush and my medium small brush. It's actually very small. Just for reference, you can see how big it is compared to my chipped nail. So that is the brush I'm going to use to get up into this last bit of branch. And it will be the brush I also use to get between the owl's toes. Now this is a round brush. I really do prefer the flat angled brushes. So now that our feet and branch are finished, the next step is to paint half of these leaves brown and the other half will be blue. And then the moon will be brown, which I'm not quite digging. I may try to paint that blue and maybe paint this bubble brown instead. I think that would look a lot better. It's not following the exact pattern of the online copy, but I think it would look a lot better. The model I used has every leaf having the same side. So since I'm making the left side of this leaf brown, all the leaves should have brown on the left sides. So far, we have all of the brown done. No, except for that speech bubble. I am going to pause here because I am going to do a second coat on all of this brown to make it look very solid, which I will not put you guys through. And furthermore, I am running out of memory on my camera, so I'm going to have to take some of this video off and then start fresh. So we will be back when I've done a second coat, and we're going to start on the blue. So as you can see, I've finished the second coat on the brown. Everything is nice and solid. I am now going to mix up the blue, and we're going to paint the details blue, and then I will work on a background color, so we'll see what happens. Now, the blue is going to be a mixture of white, and this says it's bright blue, so we'll have some of that. And then, once again, this doesn't say, oh, ultramarine, so it's a very nice oceany kind of blue. I'm going to start out with the light blue. I'm going to add it into this one because we don't have nearly as much detail on the owl for the blue as we would for the body. So I'm just going to mix these two. I kind of want it to be a nice bright blue, but I also don't want it to be too light. That's a pretty nice blue, but I do want it just a tad darker, so I am going to add just a little drop of the ultramarine. It's darkened it up just a bit. I'm trying not to tilt it too much because I don't want my paint to come out of my palette. Again, we're sticking with this small medium brush that I'll have to try to flatten out. And we're going to use that for a lot of these white spaces. Probably the beak, in between the eyes, the eyebrows, the feet, most definitely. And then I may use a bigger brush for the moon and the leaves. we are trying to avoid globs and any white spots. There we have a nice bright blue. I think it contrasts the brown very nicely. So I'm going to continue painting all of the other white details with this really pretty blue. We've got all of the owl's details painted in blue. Some of it probably will need a little bit of a second coat touch-up. A lot of these smaller areas, it's hard to get a thick coat without smearing the coat into the brown. So for now, we are going to finish up with the leaves, the moon, and then go through a second coat retouch-up. You do want to have nice, smooth edges. Had this been a detail picture, I would have been fine to let the canvas kind of separate these edges, but since it is a very solid design, I'm trying to make the edges as smooth and linear, I suppose, as absolutely possible. Now, you guys may be noticing that I'm starting a little farther away from the edge and then bringing it into the edge. This is because the first touch of the paintbrush usually contains a lot more paint, which can make it globby, and that glob, if not brought back in to the area properly, can spread out into the other paint and ruin your edges. You can simply scratch the paint in, so to speak. But near the edges, you want to be very careful. Also, you probably can see that I have a lot of paint on the side of my hand and my knuckle. We have to be very careful to make sure if we feel any wet paint under our hand that we remove it immediately so that it does not transfer to the other finished areas of our painting. Again, because we are not going to be outlining these pieces with a Sharpie or a paint pen, we need to make sure that there are as few white dots around the edges as absolutely possible. And once again, despite my heavier coat of paint, I will probably need to do a second layer of blue all over everything, simply because this piece is based on a very solid portrait, a very solid color scheme, because there is next to no detail work. So I'm going to double up on my blue layer, and then we will work on the background. Okay, so I did a second layer of the rest of the blue. I also added a black background. I mixed some of my cerulean blue, a little bit of purple, and black. Just a couple drops of black. It darkened it up real good. I didn't make it completely homogeneous. I did want to have some extra colors popping out. As you can see, I did not do a double coat, so there are areas that appear later, but that is okay because now I'm going to use this blue, purple, and black mixture again, just in different quantities. There's far more purple and more blue, just a dab of black, and I'm going to add highlights with that. I am going to use a medium-sized flat brush. I really like the flat brushes because you can angle them as well as make wide strokes. So I'm going to pick up some of my blue-purple mixture and I'm just going to drag it. I don't want this to be very precise. This is probably going to be the most detailed aspect of my painting. I just want to add some highlights. Nice vertical highlights. Now that looks really bright on the camera lens, but it is much more subtle in real life. And when it dries, it will be even more subtle, which will make it really awesome. Now that we've finished our highlighting of the background, I'd like to go ahead and maybe add a few stars. I've also decided that to make this owl pop even more, I want to add white highlights around all of the blue within the owl and the moon. I don't think I want to do the feet, not sure yet. I definitely don't want to touch the leaves. So I'm going to find a very thin brush and we'll look at that. This white is pretty bright, but it's not quite bright enough. In real life it looks very bright on the screen. So all of this white is most definitely going to need a double coat, so I am just going to do that while I am doing the first coat, since it will not take very long to dry. So here you can see we're just outlining all of the blue spots with the white. I am going to continue this with the rest of the blue. I'm thinking about getting an even finer brush. I want something very, very thin. These are okay. I feel like I could probably do the same with the eye, the beak, and maybe these blue feathers. But for the eyebrows and probably most definitely these little eye dots, I will want to get something much, much thinner. Once I do that, I'll come back, show you guys how to add in a couple stars, and this will be done. Here is the finished product. I added white outlines around the eyes, beak, eyebrows, the moon, the feet, and I only did partial white around the feathers. I did not add white around the leaves. And I also neglected to add the stars as I thought I might. I wanted my primary focus to be on the owl, and I felt perhaps bright white stars might distract from the main focus. So, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to post them below. And I will see you next time.